AI Horror Stories presents a story that will make your soul tremble, a mysterious and scary tale of an abandoned fair where a malicious witch is found. Will you rise to face the truth and uncover the secrets of the lost children, or will you remain lost in the dark forever? Story named The Fair Witch. Deep in a dark forest, near a small town, lies an abandoned fair. They say that many years ago, when the lights flickered and music filled the air with a cheerful melody, an evil shadow hid among the attractions. I am the one who could tell the story of the witch of the fair. I remember the first time I saw her. It was a cloudy and slightly cold night, the air was charged with a strange energy. The flickering lights barely managed to dissipate the darkness that enveloped the fair. The music, instead of making me happy, felt a chill down my spine. I found myself alone, walking through the deserted corridors, when I saw her for the first time. It was a twisted and hunched figure, with a black robe that dragged on the floor. Her hair, as dark as the night itself, frames a pale, wrinkled face, with bright, piercing eyes that seemed to read my soul. A sinister laugh rang through the air as the witchy looked at me intently. "What are you doing here, little one?" he asked in a voice that sounded like a mix of whisper and creak. I tried to move, but my legs seemed to be rooted to the ground. I was snooping, I managed to stammer. The witch let out a louder laugh, a laugh that echoed in my mind. No, I was just walking," I said stutteringly, feeling the fear envelop me even more. A cold wind began to blow, causing the lights to flicker even more erratically. I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them again, the witch had disappeared. My heart was pounding as I ran away from the fair and ran back to the town. They say that those who were caught by his gaze were swept away to an unknown fate, a fate from which they never returned. Over the years, my curiosity and fascination with the story of the fair witch only grew. Even though I stayed away from that dark place, I always felt there was something else I didn't know. It was on a rainy afternoon, while sitting in my grandmother's kitchen, that I finally learned the full story behind the legend. My grandmother, a silver-haired woman and eyes full of wisdom, he noticed my lost look and asked me what was happening to me, while he stirred his cup of tea. I told him about the abandoned fair and the witch who was said to lurk in its shadows. She sighed and stopped stirring her tea, looking at me with a melancholy expression, and began to tell me what had really happened. That old woman said that many years ago, when she was just a little girl, the local fair was not an abandoned and sinister place, but a place full of joy and fun. He took a sip of his tea before continuing. He mentioned that there was a dark time when the children began to mysteriously disappear. Fathers and mothers cried desperately for the loss of their little ones. The townspeople were terrified and were looking for answers everywhere. My grandmother paused for a moment, as if she remembered with sadness those difficult times, because it was stated that the fair was cursed, that a witch had taken up residence in her and was robbing the children. The stories were so chilling that parents avoided taking their children there, and soon the fair was left empty and forgotten. Investigations and searches were carried out, but no concrete clues were ever found about what had happened to the children. The legends only grew with time, and the fair fell into abandonment. People began to avoid her, and over time, everyone stopped talking about the place. My grandmother took a moment to drink more of her tea, and then continued with a serious look in her eyes, saying that she would never it was discovered what became of the missing children. Some said that the witch had taken them to another world, while others claimed that they had gotten lost in the shadows of the fair. Whatever the truth, the story of the witch of the fair became a warning for the curious and a shadow in the memory of the town. I nodded, assimilating my words. Grandmother. The story made more sense now, but it had also become even scarier. Knowing that the children had disappeared without a trace in that cursed place filled me with concern. Despite my grandmother's warning and the dark story surrounding the abandoned fair, a persistent unease had taken root in me. I felt I must face my fear and unravel the mystery of what had really happened to me. The missing children. So one night, when the moon shone high and the wind rustled in the trees, I ventured back to the fair. The lights flickered with a dim, ghostly glow, and the air was charged with an oppressive feeling. As I walked deeper into the decrepit attractions, I could feel the invisible eyes of the witch watching. My heart was pounding and my mind was fighting against the dark thoughts that were trying to invade my reason. I arrived at the entrance of a tent, which seemed to be the epicenter of the darkness that surrounded the place. I paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, before deciding to enter. The interior was shrouded in shadows and only the intermittent lights of the fair dimly illuminated the place. There were worn-out figures of dolls, broken objects and an air of total abandonment. The wooden floor as Elle walked forward, feeling like something was watching me from the darkest corners. Suddenly, a cold breeze passed by me, like an icy sigh. The same sinister laughter I had heard before crept into my ears, making my skin crawl. "Gustavo," whispered a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I froze in place, my heart beating even faster. The voice had mentioned my name, and a sense of presence was present in the air. I turned slowly to find a figure in the shadows, a figure I knew all too well from descriptions and legends. It was the witch, her dark robes billowing around her as she advanced toward me with a crooked smile. His bright eyes locked onto mine, and I felt as if he were looking directly through my soul. That sinister being asked me with a serene but powerful voice what I was doing there. I swallowed hard, trying to stay calm as I responded to the witch who wanted to know what happened to the children. The witch stopped in front of me, her smile slowly fading away, answering that the children had been taken to a place beyond this world. A place where time does not follow the same rules and desires take strange forms. The answer perplexed me, but I also felt a wave of inflammation asking what had happened there and if they were still alive. The witch seemed contemplative for a moment, as if she were remembering a time that had already passed. She answered that they were still alive, but not in the sense that I understood. She mentioned that their souls were trapped in a corner of reality, a space between what is and what could have been. I looked at the witch, trying to understand her words. "Can I do something to help?" The dark figure moved towards me, his intense and penetrating gaze told me that I could try, but keep in mind that the balance between worlds is fragile and wishes can have unpredictable consequences. Before he could ask any more questions, the witch began to fade into the shadows. "Remember, Gustavo, deep mysteries are rarely fully revealed. The path she has chosen is dangerous, but if you are willing to risk everything, perhaps you will find the truth you seek." The witch's last words echoed in the air as she disappeared into complete. I found myself alone in the dark tent, with more questions than answers. I knew that I had begun a path full of uncertainty and danger, but I also felt that I had to continue forward in search of the missing children and the answers that had eluded the town for so long. I investigated every corner of the fair, following fragmented clues and forgotten whispers that seemed to guide me toward a grim revelation. One night, while exploring one of the more deteriorated attractions, I noticed something unusual beneath the stage of an old ride. Ring toss. As I carefully lifted it, my eyes widened at the sight that revealed itself before me, a series of small makeshift graves, each marked with a name and a date. My heart ached. Stopped as I bent down to read the names carved into the wood. They were the names of the missing children, the same names that had been forgotten by time and sadness. The dates on the tombstone suggested that decades had passed since their disappearances, and the sadness and pain of that time seemed to weigh on me. Reality hit me hard. The children had been there all this time, under the fair that was once a place of laughter and joy. A mixture of anger and sadness washed over me as I knelt by the graves, as if I were paying homage to the lost spirits. As I reflected on what I had discovered, a feeling of presence began to fill the air. The cold breeze returned to caress my skin, and the same sinister laughter that I had heard before echoed in the wind. I stood up, looking around cautiously. The dark figure of the witch emerged from the shadows, her glowing eyes fixed on me, telling me that she had found the truth I sought, followed by my name. I nodded, still overwhelmed by the revelation. The kids were here all the time. Because? Why did you keep them hidden? The witch looked grim as she responded again that the children had been taken to a place where their desires and destinies were separated. Their souls were trapped in this corner between worlds. The witch assured that her intention was not to cause them harm, but to maintain their existence in a fragile balance. "Is there anything I can do for them?" I asked, feeling the urgency to help those trapped children. The witch looked up at the night sky, as if looking for answers in the stars, looking at me while told me if I was willing to sacrifice something precious, I could open a way for their souls to return. The weight of his words fell on me. I knew what it involved, a personal sacrifice that would alter my own reality. But I also knew that I couldn't leave those lost children in limbo forever. I looked at the witch, determined, telling him that he would do what was necessary to bring them back. The dark figure nodded, and his eyes seemed to shine with a gleam of approval. Assuring myself that the path I had chosen is not easy or safe, but if you are willing to face the challenges, maybe you can bring light to this dark corner of reality. With those words, the witch vanished into the shadows, leaving me alone among the children's graves. I knew that the path I had begun would be difficult and full of obstacles, but I also felt that I had the responsibility to bring justice to those who had been forgotten and lost in the darkness of the fair abandoned. With determination and a heart full of compassion, I entered the darkness ready to fulfill my promise. I knew that the path I had chosen would be arduous and full of sacrifices, but I could not allow the children to remain trapped in that dark corner of reality. As I progressed in my quest, I faced difficult trials and challenges that tested my courage and determination. The witch's presence guided me at times, offering advice and warnings as I navigated the dangerous terrain that stood between the worlds. Finally, I reached a place where the boundaries between the worlds became dimmer. I was at the very threshold between the reality I knew and the world the children had been taken to. Here, at that point of convergence, I made my final choice. I knew that to free the children's souls, I would have to sacrifice something valuable. As I stood on that threshold between worlds, feeling the weight of the sacrifice I had made, I began to understand what I had truly lost. He hadn't just handed over something valuable, I had given up my own soul. A feeling of emptiness and disconnection enveloped me, as if a fundamental part of myself had been torn away. The children, those whose souls I had helped free, were approaching. Their luminous forms, they glowed with a serenity and joy they had not known in a long time. They seemed to be guided by a force that only I could feel, a presence that emanated from me. As the children approached, I knew that the time had come to continue my path further, into the void that stretched in front of me. I knew that my role as a keeper of the light would take me to new horizons, to face challenges I could not yet fully understand. Although I was tempted to stay and witness the children's joy, I knew I had a greater purpose to fulfill. The children seemed to sense my imminent departure, and although I couldn't by communicating with words, I was able to convey a sense of gratitude and hope. He stopped for a moment, looking in my direction with a look full of understanding. They knew that my destiny was somewhere else, that my role as guide transcended the present moment. With one last glance at the children, I stepped into the void, leaving behind the reality I had known. As I moved forward, I felt my being expand and merge further into the fabric of the universe. I became an omnipresent presence, an influence that was able to manifest at crucial moments to provide guidance and hope. As I explored the vast space between the worlds, I felt a sense of peace and purpose that filled my being. I knew that although my shape had changed and my limits had blurred, my existence had a deeper meaning than ever. In the distance I could see how that witch looked at me and laughed. It was as if he were mocking me. My whole world had really ended at that moment. I never knew what fate the souls of those children had, or what happened to that witch. I only know that I should never have gotten close to her. That part that took my life away from me in the blink of an eye. If you want more such horror stories, subscribe to AI Horror Stories channel and press the bell icon so you don't miss any new videos. Share your horror reactions and thoughts in the comments, we love your feedback.